All right, we've got a lot coming up on the show. Dave Sharma will join me a bit later to speak about that, as well as Bridget McKenzie, Michael Downby, Michael Shoebridge. But now let's bring in my regular Wednesday panel, former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger and Labor legend Graham Richardson. Welcome to you both. Look, this was really a stunning operation. Michael Kroger, what was your reaction when you woke up to hear the news of it today?
Well, it was an incredibly successful operation by the Israelis, and it was directed towards military targets in Lebanon and Syria, and it worked incredibly successfully. Unlike Hezbollah, by the way, who fire rockets at willy-nilly, civilians or otherwise, into the northern parts of Israel. They don't care who they kill. So as a targeted operation, this was incredibly successful. They said, we're going after military targets, and that's exactly what they did. And the fact that up to 3,000 Hezbollah fighters have been injured probably ultimately will curtail a lot of their activities. And very clearly, the Israelis know where Nasrallah is, the leader of Hezbollah. He would know that they know where he is, and they could take him out at any opportunity. So as you say, this will probably be a good step towards ending this fight between, Hezbollah and the Israelis.
Richo, this will go down as one of the legendary intelligence operations, don't you think?
Oh, this is brilliant. I think that's the only word for it. Absolutely brilliant. And it means that if you're against Israel over there, you are worrying every minute of every day, will I be alive tomorrow? I think that's a good way to have your enemy.
No question about it. Look, we're going to return to this. We'll have analysis throughout the show because it was the biggest story around the world today. But more locally in Australia, last night, the who's who of the business community gathered for the BCA annual dinner, where the Prime Minister claimed that he is pro-business and pro-worker. But Michael, he tiptoed around the union-backed IR laws. This is the main point of contention. He did admit there were cracks in the relationship with the business sector. Let's have a quick look at that.
I am optimistic that government and business can do this together. We have different responsibilities that demand different approaches. So it is inevitable we will have occasional differences of opinion.
Michael, do you think Albanese is facing, to some extent, a revolt from the business community?
Well, of course he is. The question is whether the business community can act on that and change votes. I mean, the trade union movement for decades have given money to and supported the Labor Party in elections. The BCA and, state-based affiliates and hangers-on tend to be neutral during election campaigns, which doesn't do their cause any good because the government then the Labor government never fear them. So they've got to get active like the mining companies did over the mining tax. I mean, if you don't fight, you lose. The Business Council doesn't fight, so it keeps losing. So it has these wonderful dinners and cocktail parties where they, have these meetings. But I'm sorry, Labor politicians take no notice of the Business Council of Australia, and increasingly so, the Liberal Party politicians don't take much notice of them. The last public campaign the business community ran with full force was to give millions of dollars to The Voice.
Good point.
That was a debacle and a disaster, and makes them just insipid. So if they get back to fighting for their members, people will start taking them seriously, and the incoming Liberal government, if that's to be the case, will take them seriously.
And they have shown a bit of fight over the past fortnight, and we hear that behind the scenes the Prime Minister hasn't been happy about this. He's communicated some of that privately, as I understand it, to senior leadership in the BCA. But Richo, it's not just the business community who's complaining here. Your old mate, Bill Kelty, has come out at a private luncheon to say that, well, the government's not doing enough to lift productivity. What did you make of his remarks?
Well, I think when Kelty speaks, you're a mug if you don't listen. That's the main point here. Kelty is wise beyond belief and has a stellar record. So if I were the government and I heard Kelty taking a stance like that, I'd be listening and I'd be acting upon it.
Would you agree with what he said, that there needs to be tax reform? He said personal income tax brackets, when you add in GST, he's saying it's over 50%, it's too high. You put in bracket creep on top of that, and even with the tax cuts, people are paying more tax than they were 2 years ago. This is what he's saying. There needs to be tax reform.
Yeah, well, there does. Otherwise, you do what we're doing now. You chase your tail. You just go around in a circle. And that's all we're doing. So something's got to be done to break that. And if we don't break it, then I think all we're doing is condemning ourselves to committing the same sins.
I mean, the problem is, Michael Kroger, that government spending just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The NDIS, one of the biggest cost blowouts. So no government is going to want to rein in personal income tax. But I mean, it's unsustainable, isn't it?
Absolutely unsustainable. I mean, as I said, the problem with Chalmers is he's too weak. He's spending $130 billion more between 2023 and 2026, according to the budget papers. $130 billion more than he's getting. And so when you've got a weak treasurer who cannot resist the demands upon him, right? He always wants to spend money. And look, you can say, there's no cause that isn't a good cause for government. Infrastructure, welfare, health, education. But you've got to draw the line somewhere. And when you've got a weak treasurer who doesn't have an economics background like Jim Chalmers, who's floundering, it's very bad for the government. And, to be a successful government, state or federal, you've got to have a strong treasurer who can resist the overtures of your own supporters. Chalmers can't do that. Albanese can't do it. They're captives of the sort of the left-wing, activists. And that's why the Australian economy is in a mess. And it's not going to get any better under Chalmers, because, as most people think, he's spending far too much money, and that's why inflation is still just under 4%.
Yeah, exactly. Inflation has come down, but it is persistent. Richo, the Prime Minister was clearly hoping for a rate cut before he calls the election. This is what he wanted to announce, that he's got the cost of living under control. You've had your first rate cut. Inflation's coming down. But now we're seeing reports that actually there might not even be a rate cut in the first quarter of next year. He has to call the election in that time period. So it's not looking good for the PM.
No, I don't think that there's any good timing ahead for Anthony. I think the problem is whenever he goes, there are problems. I think he was looking for a sweet spot. It's not going to come. So he's got to face that reality, and then he's got to face up to an election that is not going to be easy to win.